So let's proceed on now. Going from here, let's have a look at porphyrins. Now, you might want to go to the back of your manual, and we're going to go to the hypoxia, or the making of hemoglobin. This is very common problem. That's the one. Let's stick that one up. It's that laminate, okay? I use this every day. Almost every other patient shows to hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. And lack of oxygen will lead to the production of free radicals. So strange that it might seem, that oxygen actually works in the last part of making energy in the mitochondria. And with oxygen, what we have to do is to add oxygen one electron on at a time. So when you add one electron to oxygen, you get a thing called superoxide. When you add 2 electrons onto it, you get hydrogen peroxide. When you add 3, you get the hydroxyl radical. And when you get 4, you get water. So water is the end product of that. So if you're adding 1 electron at a time instead of all 4 in one go, you'll end up with these free radicals or reactive oxygen species in your mitochondria, which will then blow you apart. Okay, so basically it self-destructs the mitochondria. Luckily, we can rebuild mitochondria a lot through exercise and through the right diet and things. But the major protector inside the mitochondria of free radicals is coenzyme Q10. So coenzyme Q10 carries the electron along through the electron transport chain, but it also acts as an antioxidant. And the major oxidative stress to the mitochondria is actually lack of oxygen. It's hypoxia. So hypoxia, or low oxygen tension. Now, do we see this on the oximeter or blood test? You've got to be pretty bad to end up with true hypoxia. You end up in hospital. So what you can do with the oximeter is you stick it on your finger and then you press the button. And then you look at it that way round, and it'll take just a moment to flick up and down, and it'll probably tell me I'm 97 with 82 as a pulse rate. So 82 as a pulse rate, 97 oxygen. Now, is that bad? Is it good? I've never seen anybody 100%, because I don't think they can put 100 on there, the 3 digits. So stick that on your big finger, okay, on the nail bed, and then press the button. And remember, you read it round the other way. That's it. Otherwise, you'll get confused. You're 45 instead of 80. Right? Is it accurate? I have no idea. It's what they use in ambulances and all sorts of things. You can buy them. They're only not that expensive. But as I say, I've never found anybody to show to 100%. Or tell a lie. There was one guy, but he got an oxygen cylinder by the side of him. He got pulmonary obstructive pulmonary disease, and he was on oxygen, and he was high. But normally, I think most of us don't breathe very deeply because we don't open our chests up enough. But the most important reason for hypoxia is lack of heme. And heme is the compound that then mixes with hemoglobin, the protein, to make hemoglobin. But heme also goes on to make all those other enzymes I talked about, which are involved with the immune system and the detoxification, all iron-depending enzymes. Now, the popular story, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, is our good King George III. That is, keep going round. Okay, see what did you measure?
82 over 97, does that make any sense?
I don't know which is which. It should tell you. 82 is your pulse. 97 is your oxygen, not the other way around. I was going to say, you better go to hospital fast. If you're 82, you do need to go to hospital. Okay. So King George, as you know, had periods of madness. And then, if you've ever watched the film, appeared to recover and had some strange psychiatric sort of tying him down and shouting and screaming at him. But what they observed, if you watch the film, is he made very rash decisions in the summertime. He was a great farmer, really. They used to call him Farmer George because he looked after pigs at Windsor Castle and things. And he loved the outdoor life and things. And but he made very rash decisions in the summertime. And what they found is they locked him in Windsor Castle. He made proper decisions, and he seemed to be sensible. So he was more sensible over the winter time than he was over the summertime. So the sunshine or the light had an effect on him. And we didn't know what that reason was for 200 years or so before they discovered about porphyria is something which is porphyrins are sensitive byproducts making on the way of making heme are light sensitive. So they absorb light. And these then create free radical productions which do a lot of damage. Now, all enzymes in the body need coenzymes and cofactors to get them to work. But equally, you've got good things like zinc and magnesium to make enzymes work. You've got bad things which can inhibit it. And those bad things are called toxic metals. So toxic metals inhibit good metals from activating the enzyme. So for every good element, you've got a bad one, which is a poison. And that poison might be lead, it could be cadmium, it could be nickel, etc., etc. So the story goes that he recovered, and then really that story finishes, doesn't it? It's a little bit of disappointment, the madness of King George. If you read his actual story in Wikipedia, gives a sort of brief story of George III, he actually didn't recover. He got on to be worse, and eventually, for the last, I think I'm right there, 20 years, or certainly the last 10 years, the Prince Regent took over. In other words, the oldest son took over, but he couldn't become king because the king was still alive and wouldn't give up his crown, of course. So when George finally died, the Prince Regent took over as George the Fourth, isn't it? George the Fourth, and reigned about 10 years and then died. He didn't take over till much older. And George III didn't die till he was 80 something, but he died blind, deaf, in pain, and he'd been like this for years and years and years. Now they exhumed what was left of him, I suppose, I think he's in Windsor Castle somewhere, within the last 20 years of the story. And he was full of arsenic. And arsenic, they now know, inhibits quite a number of the enzymes of making heme. Okay? So clearly he had a build-up of these porphyrins, as they're called, which made him very sensitive to light. But the question is, where did the arsenic come from? So Prince Regent was waiting to become king and very impatient because his father was terminally ill for 20 years. So I'm not saying anything. Let's not have a conspiracy theory here. But also, because arsenic was used as a medicine, medicinal, and probably was in a lot of other things. So a lot of paints and so on. Because Napoleon, they found, was full of arsenic, and they, from the paint, he used to scratch the walls to get out of his room in St. Helena. So we don't know, but the answer is that there was a lot of arsenic around. So it could have been arsenic it's the poisoners of choice, isn't it? Poison of choice of poisoners, because very small bits are undetected. You can't detect arsenic very easily. What? Clear? I've never tried it. There was a television program. What was the other one? Was it not thorium, gallium? There was another poison that the chap used, which he said you can never detect it. So there are these things out. And they work, toxic metals work primarily by inhibiting good ones. So they displace it so the enzyme doesn't function. So that was perhaps a little bit of the story. And of course his rash decisions was he gave America away. Well, he didn't give America away, he sent troops in against the British people. So the Americans, we had to remember, the colonists were British. And the British people who there had settled, and George sent English troops against them because they wanted not just independence, but they wanted to be able to tax their own thing, their own tea and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to having the British government there. So he made really rash decisions. So it's interesting when you go around Philadelphia and places in Boston, you know, on the coast there. I have to correct the guide who tells you the story because he says the English. And I said, it wasn't the English, I said it was the British. Okay, let's get it right. The Scots and the Welsh were involved just as much as the English in there. But they keep blaming the English, which I have to correct them about. So, Madness of King George, worth watching. It's Nigel Hawthorne. You can probably get it off Amazon or Netflix. But it's a good film, but now I've told you the sort of the story, I think you'll understand it much better and say, that's what Chris was talking about. When he was exposed to the light, he made these irrational decisions. So he did go quite funny in the head. So this is the chart. It's the same chart on both sides. So I've just given you the one chart here, but I've given you this one for a particular reason, as you'll see. So any of these enzymes where there's arrows can become inhibited from a toxin point of view. And lead is a big one. This is how they discovered about lead having a toxic effect on brain function in children. So lead toxicity in children ended up blocking this particular enzyme here, particularly, which went on then to produce low levels of heme, which reduced the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. So they were called, subnormal children, because they had learning difficulties because they just weren't getting the oxygen up into the brain. And lead tends to do this, and we find that lead is very high in certain areas, and particularly in Ireland, isn't it? We found it very high in Ireland. Okay, so each of these is an intermediate compound in the way of making heme. Now, we want to concentrate, let's go back. What I want to concentrate is on this part here. Okay, so I'm going to enlarge that one, which should be in your manual, if you have a look back in your manual there. Okay. So we make heme from succinyl-CoA in the Krebs cycle and the amino acid glycine. And then that goes across to make alpha-levulinic acid, and then to porphobilinogen, or PBG we call it for short. So we see this five-sided ring forming here. This is a single pyrrole, it's called. And then it goes on to get 4 pyrroles together, which goes on eventually to make heme. Now this one here, this first pyrrole here, if the enzyme here is defective, we don't make the 4 pyrroles together. So this would therefore strengthen a person, and this would weaken the person. So a person who weakens to PBG but strengthens to hydroxymethylbilane would have an inhibition of the enzyme here. Now this is important because this enzyme is dependent upon pyridoxal 5-phosphate and NADH. So we come back to possibilities with our patient here. So NADH. There are sometimes some other things in there which show up with people, sometimes magnesium and zinc, and we'll talk about those. So it's inhibited by mercury, PB, which is lead, and LSD. So you mustn't take LSD. Okay. You can, or lead or mercury. But it's worthwhile checking those two with you, because those would be the things that may be inhibiting your enzymes from functioning. Now, when this is inhibited, it means we get a build-up of PBG. And PBG would be passed out in the urine as a pyrrole, and it's measured by particular lab tests as high levels of PBG in the urine. But equally, it can become oxidized, like we talked about with adrenaline. And the oxidation here goes down to forming these pyrrole compounds, which are often called cryptopyrrole. But in fact, according to Abram Hoffer, it's actually hydroxyheme pyrrole, or HPL, which is the one which causes the neurological problems. So the result of this oxidation gives off, if you look up here, you've got ammonia. Do you see the NH3 here? Okay. And it's not here. So what we've given off is, in this process of making these pyrroles, we've given off ammonia. But in the metabolism of PBG to hydroxybilane, we also give off 4 molecules of ammonia. Because we've got 1 molecule there, then we make 4 of those together, makes 4 molecules. Now if you get a build-up of ammonia, ammonia is highly toxic to the brain, so it's called neurotoxic, and it's also nephrotoxic, which means it's very toxic to the kidneys. Okay? So it's highly toxic substance, and it has to be got rid of, and the way we metabolize it usually is with pyridoxal 5-phosphate. So the most common antidote, if you like, to high ammonia is pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Or, put another way, pyridoxal 5-phosphate deficiency often leads to high ammonia. Now, high ammonia, you've probably all smelt ammonia is smelling salts. And it can make people, give them kidney problems, can give them liver problems, and can give them brain problems. And these people, when you find this and you test it, have terrible thoughts. Okay? They have very, very doom and gloom thoughts. Often at liver time, they wake up in the middle of the night and they feel really, really bad. And by bad, I mean bad. You know, they could top themselves. It's that bad. And when you find somebody who weakens to ammonia, just ask them, do they ever get these thoughts of real doom and gloom? And they will say, how do you know? I was teaching in Istanbul a little while ago, and we were doing this, and this woman doctor showed, and I said to her, do you get these feelings of doom and gloom? And she looked at me and she said, how do you know? So I said, because you've got ammonia. She said, I've been to almost every psychiatrist in Istanbul and nobody spotted that. And I said, well, you take this, and I think it was P5B. She was so grateful. I have a lot of Parkinson's patients, and they seem to be high in ammonia as well. So the ammonia is a real toxic substance, and it's not from outside, it's produced from inside the body. And ammonia is usually metabolized through the urea pathway, which I put in there, which needs biotin and vitamin C, but definitely it uses up the P5P. So these people who end up with these cryptopyroles or these pyrrole problems are very low usually in P5P, they're very low in magnesium, and they're very low in zinc. The three main things that Gill talked about this morning, almost universal, P5P, magnesium and zinc. If you had nothing else in a test kit, you know, probably 50% of the nutrients that you prescribe would be P5P, magnesium, zinc. It's true, isn't it? Those people who've done nutrition, it is those three things. So this is a very interesting little bit to study here, because you hear a lot about cryptopyrrole and pyrrole diseases, and I get a constant emails from people saying, can you tell me what the pyrrole is, and can you tell me what the difference between that and porphyria is? What are porphyrins, what are pyrroles? So pyrroles are these individual five-sided molecules here, which go on as individual substances. When they come together as four pyrroles, they're called a porphyrin. So a porphyrin is basically four pyrroles come together. And they have to go through the process here. We've looked here at this enzyme here. Let's go back. So they have to go then down to this one, to uroporphinogen, coproporphinogen, etc. down. And each of those is an oxidizing or a decarboxylating enzyme. And if they don't function, it shunts them sideways into these porphyrins, which are light sensitive. They're compounds which they actually make the urine go violet colour, purple colour. So this is what they observed with King George. If you watch the film, that they used to, the main physician that looked after the king always took a sample of the king's urine every day. And then he had to do the royal tasting. And the shock was, it was purple one time, and then they realised there was something serious here. That was logged down, and then 200 years later someone said, purple urine, that's a sign of porphyria. Poor old King George was probably suffering from porphyria. No wonder he went a bit funny in the head. Now, if you get these porphyrins in the areas of light exposure, they can cause the damage from producing more superoxide and hydrogen peroxide. And one of those areas is the macula of the eye. So the macula of the eye is particularly sensitive to light, because that's what its job is. But at 400 nanometers, which is just on the cusp between blue and violet there, at 400 nanometers it stimulates superoxide, and superoxide then goes on to make hydrogen peroxide. And hydrogen peroxide on the macula of the eye doesn't do you any good. And that's what's called macular degeneration. So macular degeneration, which is very common now as people get older, is basically a form of porphyria. These people are deficient, they have high levels of uroporphinogen or coproporphinogen, and they're deficient in pyridoxal 5-phosphate. So we could do a whole seminar on vision and visual problems, but macular degeneration is porphyria. And all you've got to do is find out where that is and fix them up with the right nutrient to try and get rid of those porphyrins. Otherwise the degeneration continues. Now, on here, you'll see there's various stages here. These porphyrins, if they build up because we've got inhibition of the enzymes, due to toxins or deficiencies in the diet and things, produce different symptoms. So if I blow this one up here, so you take the first one, alpha-linolenic, and then we go uroporphinogen, which is the one we've looked at here. And we go on down. So here, we've got in the alpha-linolenic dehydrase, which goes on to make PBG, we've got abdominal pains and neuropsychiatric disorders. So these would be the symptoms. Abdominal pains, interesting, and neuropsychiatric problems. What does that mean? Could mean anything, couldn't it? It's anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, paranoia. They're all neuropsychiatric disorders, aren't they? So there's a lot of tying in here if you come to it. Abdominal pains. How many of our patients get abdominal problems? Awful lot, don't they? Have got it on some form or other. And it never really dawned on me. People who get a lot of gut problems, a lot of pain in their gut. If we go on down the different enzymes here, we see photosensitivity. This means that they're sensitive to the light. And this would increase their psychiatric problems and also their abdominal problems. These people must wear glasses, sunglasses in the summer when it's right, and ideally take lutein or lutein and zeaxanthin as a blotting paper to the violet end of the spectrum. You can download this whole acetate off the website, and then you can laminate it yourself. You can download it as an A3, or just download it and blow it up to an A3. That's what have I got? It's in the back, but it's on the website as well. But you can read that, can you? Yes, that's all right. Nothing wrong with your eyes then. Okay. So it's interesting is that, and then you go down, some of them have this photosensitivity. These are people who can't take the light. They're okay in most light, but it's the bright light. Bright lights upset them. You know, they can't tolerate the bright light. Okay? You'll know, if you go to somebody who weakens to the 400 nanometers and shows this, and ask them about that, they say, no, I can't drive at night time because of the bright lights. It affects the retina on their eyes and things. Okay. So photosensitivity, abdominal pains, photosensitivity. And I didn't really think very much more, but we were great followers. I know Julie follows this as well, for a couple of years of House.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you learn more medical knowledge from House than you will from any textbook, I reckon. And because all the disorder, all these programs are things we meet every day. And it's really interesting because it's not until right at the end that the diagnosis comes together and you think, I should have seen that. You know, I thought of this or that. And then it all fits into place. And wonderful, really, how the writers do this. And one of these was somebody with abdominal pains. And this person had abdominal pains, and they had in the hospital every test that there was done. And the woman was in agony. She'd had it opened up, laparotomy, had a look inside. Nobody could find anything else, you see. And they did I'm not sure whether it was a scan, ultrasonic scan, whatever it was, probably an ultrasonic scan. And House looked at it very, very carefully. And then he spotted it. And he spotted that the peristalsis was going the wrong way. It was actually reversing the contents back, and the woman was blowing up. And that was causing the pain. It was causing distension of the intestine. But he had to look at it, and we didn't see it. Nobody saw it, of course. But he looked very carefully, and he said, the intestine would be, our peristalsis should be going that way, and it's going that way. And that's why she was getting the abdominal pains. She was getting spasms in there. The colic was being unbelievable. And that's what a lot of people with abdominal pains get, who've got porphyria. Okay, so bear that in the back of your mind, because I've got somebody I've been treating for well over a year who's had abdominal pains, and I've never got to the bottom of it. And then I realised that, let's test that. And she was, in fact, positive to porphyria. But she, interesting, and I should have seen this, because she's developed macular degeneration. And I didn't put two and two together, that macular degeneration was a sign of porphyria, and that's what her abdominal pains were. So you get a symptom here, you get a symptom there, and when you put it together, you think, yes, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so porphyrins are a class of compounds similar to hemoglobin because they're metabolites in between, found throughout the body, and when produced in excess can cause psychosis, known as porphyria. Now, if I just quickly zoom back, all this, or most of this, happens inside the mitochondria. So the darker bits here and here are inside the mitochondria. So remember, we're down in where we actually make the energy in the powerhouse of the cells. That's where we need the oxygen, so we make our hemoglobin down in there. But it's also the fact that things that poison this are going to poison our mitochondria. So let's move on there. So there are many chemicals that will poison the brain and cause strange reactions, including alcohol, ammonia, narcotic drugs, atropine, heavy metals, insecticides, etc. These compounds will not only create changes in perception and thinking, but also decrease the level of consciousness. So remember that, you know, the toxins produce changes because they inhibit enzymes from functioning. So we've looked at nutrients that can get these enzymes to work, but we mustn't forget that some of these people may be producing endogenous toxins like ammonia, or outside toxins, exogenous, like drugs and heavy metals, insecticides. It's well known in biochemistry that chemicals similar in structure also have similar effects in the body, both chemically and psychobiologically. We saw that with the indole rings. They all produce these psychiatric problems. So pyroluria is known by many different names: pyrrole disorder, cryptopyrrole, cryptopyrroluria, etc., Mo factor, and heme pyrrole. Pyrouria can best be described as the abnormal synthesis and metabolism of oxygen-carrying molecule hemoglobin. As with all cells, there are waste or byproducts produced, and the byproduct of PBG is the metabolite hydroxyhemopyrrole, HPL, also known as pyrrole. The metabolite was originally thought to be cryptopyrrole, but further studies have proven this not to be the case. So here we see again that blow-up of that other one, PBG, porphyrin, going on to make hydroxymethylbilane. But if this enzyme is inhibited, it shunts it into making hydroxyhemopyrrole, which is the major pyrrole which causes behavior problems in children. These are behavior problems in adults as well. Usually children who have behavior problems as adults, don't they, as well? It's just they keep them slightly better under control. I was a hyperactive child when I ate Smarties and things. Don't give me, I'm not allowed Smarties. I used to get sent home from children's parties for bad behaviour. And I used to have to walk round the block for an hour before I dare go home, because my mother would ask me, why are you home so early? I couldn't really say, well, I was expelled from the party for bad behaviour. But when you look back, the children's parties aged 7 and 8 were jellies with full of hundreds and thousands on them, you know, hundreds and thousands. You know, all those colours and things were great. And of course, it didn't take long before they were thrown around. And okay, so but I keep it better under control now. Most of the time. Okay. So Mo factor, hydroxyhemopyrrole, otherwise known as Mo factor, and you can see there it's mauve. So it's 415, which is coming down from indigo towards the violet. Now you've got these nicely in your sac. So if you have a look at the ones there, you'll see hydroxyhemopyrrole. That is the main pyrrole, which is called mauve disease, mauve disorder. These are people that you will find if they have high PBG and low hydroxymethylbilane. So they're shunting and they're making these cryptopyrroles down here. These are thought to be behind attention deficit disorders and all sorts of behavior problems and bad tempers and all sorts of things, particularly in children but also in adults. Now there are a number of these pyrroles, 4 in fact, and you're lucky because I think you've got 3 of those. So you've got in there cryptopyrrole 416 nanometers, hydroxycrypto 410, hydroxyhemo, which is 415, and hemopyrrole, which is 412. So you've got, I think you've got 3 of those, haven't you? I think probably, is it the cryptopyrrole lactane you haven't got? Or maybe the hemopyrrole. Is that one I think you haven't got? Yes, okay. So if you ask for that one, if you start to find you get into this and you treat a lot of bad behaviour, adults and children, you might want to check them through with it. But it is this one, which is the main one that they measure nowadays. It binds both B6, that's pyridoxal 5-phosphate, zinc, and causes a multiple deficiency. It often requires magnesium support. It's a marker of oxidative stress. It's discovered in 1957, named after the lilac-coloured appearance of the paper on chromatography. It's elusive. Abram Hoffer is considered and awarded the honour of being the father of mauve. All normal mauve, he was looking at schizophrenics, 27 out of 39 early schizophrenics were positive. All 7 who recovered on niacin converted to being negative on the mauve properties. So he was the first one to link mauve and the heme into the schizophrenic concept, and adrenochromas, we'll see where it comes in. So relapses were often associated with the reappearance of mauve, apparent roles in other behaviours like alcoholism and depression, and so-called mentally retarded people. These people are very sensitive to light and heat. Relatives should be tested because it's a genetic thing which is handed on. So probably there's something in our royal family at the moment, because they all come from George's side of the family. Ultimately, wasn't they? Victoria was a niece of the Georges. Preventive criminal deviates, all recovered schizophrenics were negative. So this is all first documented observations of mauve associated with stress. All these kids are very stressed. You know, they're hyperactive, they're stressful. Some of them are just uncontrollable. You know, I was never uncontrollable, honestly, apart from with Smarties or hundreds of thousands. But these children are uncontrollable. And they have bouts, of course, when the level goes up. And there's no predicting when it goes up. You know, it's not always after they've eaten something. Some little thing can just trigger it and they blow. Whoa! And you know about it when you meet them. They can wreck your treatment room in no time. You know, this is the problem. And especially when you find the mother feeding them sweets to calm them down, and they're not. They're feeding them sweets. And worst of all, you have one which they're feeding them Coca-Cola, isn't it? So you can imagine what aspartame does along with that as well. So 70% of Down's children, schizophrenia, autism were found by O'Reilly. Clinical behaviour. So these are just Pfeiffer. Carl Pfeiffer, of course, was a great biochemist back in the 1980s and things. Symptoms may improve in 24 hours, but usually within a week. So you have to give them high doses of the nutrients that they need, particularly P5P, magnesium and zinc. May need months in order to get a full recovery. And they relapse within days or weeks if they don't have the nutrients. So in other words, it's just a holding job, but because genetically they haven't got that enzyme to function properly, they do have to stay with it. And that's Carl Pfeiffer. For every drug that benefits a patient, there's a natural substance that can achieve the same effect. That's Pfeiffer's law. What an enlightened man. That was 1980s. We just all say the same thing now, but in those days they were nigh on struck off for saying things like that. He correlated spots on the nails, stretch marks, pale skin, poor tanning, joint pains, constipation, dream recall, morning nausea, which of course is classic with P5P deficiency, sensitive light and sound, can't tolerate odours. You know, some people, they go in, they're chemically sensitive, they go into a shop and they can't stand it in there, particularly if there's a lot of chemicals being used, a lot of sprays and so on, and people's perfumes, sensitivity to odours, migraines, stitch in the sides. Other ones have found social withdrawal, loss of appetites, etc. Abnormal fat distribution, which was a ring of fat usually around the abdomen there. So strong stress, a lot of stress, has a good correlation to mauve. Emotional stress clearly causes oxidative stress. Low heme, in other words, the low production of heme as a result of that, was a decrease in complex 4, 50% reduction in zinc, according to Bruce Ames. My friend Igor, it may well be that cytochrome P450 enzyme oxidizes PBG to hemopyrrole, and is either an intense chelator of B6 and zinc, or it facilitates the urinary excretion of both. Interestingly, PBG is broken down by a deaminase, and the release of ammonia from it may presume more need for P5P for utilizing the formed ammonia in the example. So P5P, magnesium, zinc are there to metabolize ammonia, but the lack of this creates more ammonia, the build-up of ammonia, and then I think a lot of the symptoms that the people suffer from is ammonia. It just hits the brain and just drives it crazy. That's actually Bruce Ames as a younger one. I couldn't resist that one. So HPL inhibits heme synthesis, as we saw. Experimental heme inhibition results in low levels of zinc and high iron. So is it really a disease or just a myth? Of course, the pharmaceutical companies want you on Ritalin for the kids and antidepressants for adults. So is it really a problem, or is it just a story? Does someone in your family have an irate temper? Yes, obviously over there you recognize this. Anybody else have somebody in the family with an irate temper? Yes. Sporadic. Oh, no, it's not. It's someone. So if you're dealing with a complete meltdown, you know, I've had certainly one child who had this. Luckily, she's grown out of it now, which means you have missed a 15-second window to shift the upset into neutral. So how you manage a complete meltdown with a child, you've got to act very fast and take their mind off it. This is what happens to many individuals. They miss the chance, the window of opportunity. So the adrenals produce excessive adrenaline and cortisol, not to mention a relatively unknown neurotoxin called adrenolutin. Adrenolutin kicks into the liver, creating another neurotoxin called cryptopyrrole, causing the stomach ache. That's actually probably the other pyrrole, which delivers to the thyroid, producing a burning throat and throat ache, and then to the brain, creating a headache. According to psychiatrist Richard Krauss, who researched prison populations with violent behavior, it's important to understand the link between nutritional deficiencies, mood, and brain function. Many of the symptoms of emotional volatility have been linked to deficiencies in certain B vitamins and minerals, especially zinc. Not mentioning or pointing a finger to anybody in particular. Dr. Krauss recommends a daily minimum of 100 milligrams of B6, more specifically P5P, of course, daily, 400 micrograms of folinate, the active form of folic acid, and at least 50 micrograms of B12 with a multivitamin mineral supplement to inhibit the above symptoms. So they can be brought under control. And this is really wonderful. Right at the beginning of the day, you know, I said with Abraham Hoffer and his work, that if you fix people up with emotional problems with the right nutrients, you can produce miracles. But there's no money in it. And that's the problem. There's the pharmaceuticals will not really do this because you can't patent a nutritional remedy, because it's available from food. So there's no money to be made. So that's the reason monopyrroles in porphyria, psychosis, and exposure to lead, which we talked about. So you can read those. Hemopyrrhia, cryptopyrrole are absent from the urine. So assess pyroluria patients with folates, maybe 5-methyltetrahydrofolate or folinic. Those are two of the active forms of folic acid. Again, we put 5-methyltetrahydrofolate works really well in glycerin. We haven't found folinic necessary to put into glycerin yet. Pyridoxal 5-phosphate we put into glycerin, and that works really well. Zinc we do as a liposome. NADH here, which we've talked about a lot, we do as in glycerol. Manganese, magnesium we do as liposomes. Some recommend some of the omega oils. Interestingly, with pyrolurea, for some reason, the omega-6s seem to come up more apparently than the omega-3s. So borage, evening primrose oil, blackcurrant seed oil, vitamin E and vitamin C. And patients with positive pyrrole may need anywhere up to 250 milligrams of zinc a day. That's a hell of a dose. But I think they need it because they're not absorbing it. And I think if you use the liposome, you probably find the amount that the person needs is much less. We'll try that with Steve. We didn't do an actual which zinc, did we? Or did we do zinc? Okay, the B6 doses may range from 100, anything up to 400. So we'll hold questions. Let's deal with Steve. So let's just take you back and see whether you're still with us. I think we did try a few types of zinc, didn't we, there? The liposomal, yeah. But did we try some other ones? Could you get a product? Could we have a product kit? Oh, we've got one here, don't worry. So what I want to do is just see if there's another form of zinc, and that strengthens him, as a capsule. So that would be like if he got it from his food. Pull in. So we're still tuned in, all right?
Okay.
So tell us which one you're going to test him with.
Do you need smart zinc capsule?
So smart zinc. Now,
Smart zinc, zinc liquid,
zinc liquids, that's zinc chloride and zinc sulfate.
zinc ascorbate capsule.
That's a nice form of vitamin C. Now,
Zinc chloride. Should I come here?
Zinc chloride. No.
Zinc citrate.
Doesn't mean that any of these are bad. It just don't work. You know, the absorption is obviously so small. That's why the liposome is such a good product.
Colloidal zinc.
Colloidal zinc, that's the pure zinc.
Zinc picolinate.
Nice form, very popular, zinc picolinate. Go again. No good for staying.
Zinc SA.
Zinc succinic acid.
Zinc sulfate capsule.
Zinc sulfate. Now that strengthens.
Okay.
So zinc sulfate strength. Do you have some zinc sulfate at the back perchance? What I want to do is do a comparison of the amount of zinc that he would need as a zinc sulfate. Because I think these high doses that Carl Pfeiffer and the others use there are probably unnecessarily high because I think the absorption is so low. This is the problem with these kids. They don't absorb the zinc. Plus, they're pretty bad with their diet, aren't they? It's a miracle if they get any zinc at all in their diet. Okay, so let's try zinc sulfate and see what the dose is. So the way we work, you got it as a liquid?
That's what it was.
It wasn't a capsule. Was it? Oh, was it a liquid zinc?
No, it's a capsule.
It's a capsule. Sorry, it's a capsule.
I've just unscrewed it as well.
Oh, don't worry. So while we're waiting there, let's. Have you got the acetates?
The acetates.
Yeah.
Yes, I have here.
So while we're waiting, let's see if. So these acetates are from outside going in. So we got the zinc coming up, so we keep those on
Brilliant. Well
standby.
done. Great.
Okay, so we'll pop one. These capsules are they 30s or 60s? 15 milligrams.
So we're going to start with a few, or
No, we start with one.
one,
Right, pull in. 1,
two,
2,
3,
3,
4,
4.
5.
So 5 15s. 75, is that right?
Yeah.
75 milligrams. Okay, right. So we take that off, and now we do the liposomal. You got the liposomal?
No, we should have asked them all together.
Liposomal zinc.
Can I go through? Saved you the walking.
So you all felt the vitamin D, how nice it was to just rub it on the skin there. So you can do zinc in a minute. We're handing around the zinc there. Oh, you're going to need a spoon, aren't you? Let's see. So the zinc we've got is 30 milligrams is a 5 ml spoon. So we have to guess that that's a 5 ml spoon. It's all right.
Use that one. Or?
Yeah. So we put 5 ml on. Because zinc and magnesium, you need a lot of them, we do a 200 ml bottle there to make sure he's got a good dose there. But that's 30 milligrams, isn't it? He's strong already. Whoops. See the difference? So 30 milligrams, it may be less than that, strengthens him up with the liposome, whereas he needs 75 of the sulfate capsules. So it makes economic sense which one to do. Plus, of that 75, obviously he's not absorbing very much. And that's just wasted. That means it just goes down as expensive poo, because it never gets as far as the urine, really, either. Okay. So that's why we're here. Let's try the different compounds here. So on the acetates there, we've got the hemopyrrole. So you need the light from outside. These are not biophotons, these are light from outside. So you're really challenging him, or his skin. You could put them across the eyes as well. How do you like that wavelength of light? And he's fine. Then we could say cryptopyrrole. Oh. So that one's all right. And then we can try the hydroxypyrrole lactane. So he's probably fine on all those. Did we do the adrenochrome? Let's try him on adrenochrome. So adrenochrome, remember, adrenochrome is the oxidized form of adrenaline. Okay, so you've learnt that. It's produced mainly in the mitochondria, or damages the mitochondrial DNA, which is the DNA that actually runs the genetic programs in the nucleus, in the mitochondria itself, the powerhouse of the cell, where we produce energy. So if you've got high adrenochrome, you've probably got low energy production. So let's put that, doesn't matter where we put it. So he's got high adrenochrome. So now if we come back with the zinc, we should find that negates it. Okay. So it's another way of measuring the fact that zinc is a good way. It's another diagnostic parameter. What we need to do now is to go back with the spleen was the first one, wasn't it, with him? Mm-hmm. So if we go back with the spleen, which we know weakens now, and then we put the zinc on. Okay, so he's nice and strong. Now how do we tell if he needs something else? Okay, close eyes, test, open eyes, test. Again, if you only learnt that, you'll learn that don't believe everything, the first thing that the person strengthens to. So it's eyes open, pull, nice and strong. Close eyes, pull, open eyes, pull, gone back. You could have sent him home at that stage if you hadn't done that, and there could be something more important than even the zinc with him. Okay. So let's see what the next thing is on him. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So because he's weakening to adrenochrome, I would suspect we do the NADH with him. Mm-hmm. So we can leave that on, or we can just go back to the weak muscles. So the muscles will have gone weak again.
Where's the NADH? Is it on there?
So NADH in the kit there.
Yeah, but we used it. Where have you put it?
Is it up here?
Well, the gap where it should be.
Here.
So
let's try him with the NADH, and he does strengthen to that. Mm-hmm. So again, let's test a few of the muscles, make sure that it's looking good with all the muscles. Okay, so have we NADH? Did we have some in there?
I've got one here, yeah.
We've got one where we prepared before. This is your one, I think, is it? So let's use hers.
What, the amount? Or the
No, well, how many was in that? 40, wasn't
40, yeah.
it? So we won't waste that. We know there's 40 drops in there. So let's see if that strengthens the muscles. No, he needs more than that.
40, okay, so 40.
Didn't you say you've been trying, was it you've been trying niacin?
No,
Yeah.
it was a client.
The what?
That was a
3,
client.
4.
Oh, it was a client was trying. Shoot another.
So 50.
Paul. No, next one. No, I'm just using the weak muscle.
60.
But I could use the acetates if I used a strong muscle like a quad. But what I'm doing here is I'm just using the latissimus dorsi. Okay, any of the weak muscles, as I say, 60.
60. Did that work?
So good, it looks as though it's 60. Close eyes, open eyes. Now he's strong. Okay, we can verify that by going back to the spleen. In that. Okay, close eyes, open eyes. Good. So now we've done the job. Okay. So now you're free to look at the sunshine. So, okay. So we take those off before you wobble them off. Okay. So let's make sure you understand. The last bit that we did is we had all the remedy on. Okay, everything looks fine. The patient strengthens to all the muscles are associated with the meridians. Okay, everything looks great, doesn't it? Okay, perfect. Close eyes, muscle test. Open eyes, muscle test. If he stays strong, that's it. Okay. But on the other hand, if he goes weak, then when he opens his eyes in there, it means there's something else. And that something else could be anything really. It could be another nutrient. It could be an amino acid, unlikely. It could be a vitamin, a coenzyme. It could be an essential fatty acid. You know, you may need some omega-3. Oh, you mean the remedies?
So the zinc, I would have taken the zinc off to then test the second one.
No. Well, what I've done is I've just layered it, we would call it. You put the first one on, strong, but he went weak when you did the eyes, so you put the next one on, and then he stays strong. So if you'd gone weak to the next one, we would have known there's a third one to deal with. Okay. If you take the first one off, he's going to go back into weakness anyway, isn't he? Yeah, so then you're only going to be left with one nutrient, which would be the second one. So you'd have to do the eyes closed and then it would blow him out again. Shall I do it for you? Pop back, Steve, and let's do it around the other way.
Well, I suppose you could use the test file instead.
You could use the test file instead of the, I just did it because so we worked out the dose for him. So what we would do here is let's do the second one first. Okay, so what we'll do is the NAD, okay, it's nice and strong. Close eyes and open eyes. Okay, so it goes back into weakness. So if I now put the zinc, isn't it, on? Okay, pull, close eyes, open eyes. So he stays strong. So for sure he needs both. Okay, if you do it one way and then it goes weak, you know it's the other thing. It could be that he went strong on the second one and stayed strong on that one because he could have needed zinc to activate the NADH. Could have, but he didn't. He needed both of them. Next time, if we're here and we all meet up in a year's time, he'll have a full head of hair. Anything less than that, we're not happy with it. So I'll buy you a wig to bring in. Okay, good. Okay. So, Jill, you talked about your workshops, haven't you?
Yeah, we have, yeah.
Jill runs workshops. All the seminars that we do that Gary records are online on the website. All you have to do if you're not already signed up as a practitioner, because the advantage of being a practitioner is you get a bit of a discount. And that discount goes up the more that you tend to obviously purchase as far as your products, but you don't have to purchase that many products to get a good discount. So you get the benefits of the free websites, and the free seminars and things. But we still encourage you, it's better to actually come on a seminar because you learn much more than sitting for 6 hours in front of a a computer is not that easy to keep the concentration, is it? You know, something happens, the phone rings, and you can't get back to it. So it's actually better to come on a seminar. But to follow that through and watch that again, or, you know, all the manuals are on there. Anything else you want to add, Jo?
No, I think that's all really. Thank you for being a great audience. Great to see you. Yeah.